finally is the space mirror. Who thought of this idea? Hello everybody and welcome back to episode number 1 of 3 of the World Scholars Cup for the 2020 curriculum. In this episode, we're going to be looking at global warming, massive space mirrors, and Hailcannons. If you found this video helpful, please give this a big thumbs up by clicking the like button down below. It really encourages me to keep making this quality content. And if you want to see more videos like this on my channel, please hit that thumbs up button. Also, shout out to Kevin for editing this video. You can check out his YouTube channel and his Instagram in the link down below. Now, without further ado, let's get right into the content. First up is a brief explanation to help you understand how human activity is responsible for climate change. Simply put, light enters the atmosphere, or heat enters the atmosphere through the sun and is then radiated back out into space, or a large chunk is radiated back out into space once it hits the earth in the form of infrared light. Specific greenhouse gases emitted by human activity, such as methane and CO2, make this process of light exiting the atmosphere once radiated from the earth much slower, as it slows down the light from reaching space. This traps in the light or the heat and then increases the average earth temperature. It is important to first identify that you cannot identify a consequence of global warming to a single event. Instead, we need to look at the past few years and see how the climate has changed because of human activity or global warming. Only then can we actually reach such a conclusion, as single events can just be random occurrences. First up is rising sea levels. Okay, so the sea level across the earth are rising at astonishing yet different rates across the earth. The cause of this is because of the melting ice in the Arctic and the Antarctic, as well as the fact that if you heat up the ocean, or if you heat up water, water tends to expand. So the more you heat it up, the more the sea level actually rises just because of water expanding. Another problem of climate change is the rise of extreme weather phenomena. A warmer atmosphere is one that collects, retains, and drops more water. This is because warmer air can hold more water vapor than colder air, which consequently means more rain. With temperatures increasing, this means that summers will get hotter and even drier in many places across the world. As a result, changing weather patterns means drier places will become drier and wetter places will become wetter, as well as more extreme storms. Okay, now on to mass extinction, which is the third consequence of global warming. When you think of mass extinctions, a rock from space hitting the dinosaurs is probably the first thing that jumps to your mind. In fact, there's a lot more to mass extinctions than just dinosaurs going extinct. In general, a mass extinction is a widespread and rapid decrease in biodiversity on the Earth. There are 5 mass extinctions that have happened before, and we are currently living in the 6th. However, the WC doesn't ask you specifically about the history of mass extinctions, so I have added them in the blog post, which you can check out in the link down below. Anyways, we are currently living in the 6th mass extinction, which is also known as the Holocene extinction, also known as the Anthropocene extinction, or extinction caused by human activity. Now on to geoengineering, which is defined as the large-scale intervention in the Earth's natural system. Okay, so first make sure to watch this podcast on the basics of geoengineering, as it'll give you a very good overview of what I will be talking about in this episode. You can check it out at the WC website or in the link down below. Okay, so to keep the climate at a condition before the damage is irreversible, we need to keep the average Earth temperature from increasing below 2 Celsius. If we can keep the increase in Earth temperature by global warming below 1.5 Celsius, then the damage can be reversed. We can reach a state of Earth before the Industrial Revolution. This means that by the year 2100, we need to remove approximately 100 to 1,000 gigatons of CO2 from the atmosphere. One of the main problems with implementing carbon dioxide removal systems across the world is the government implementation problems and challenges that arise. Government support is required at a local and international level to control the production of these positive externalities, which, if you've taken a microeconomics course, would know that firms are not incentivized to directly produce these positive externality. As firms want to maximize profits, they are not directly incentivized to produce these positive externalities to help the environment, as no one ends up paying them. Unless, of course, the government interferes and subsidizes a particular market. So if the government doesn't step in, businesses are not going to be incentivized to help the environment, simply because it's not profitable for them. Okay, so I'm going to list a few strategies to removing carbon from the atmosphere. Many of these strategies I will elaborate later, but it is important to understand that these ideas are extremely large scale and often require massive funding and create large liability issues for the government that they need to consider before implementing. And these products need to not only reach environmental sustainability, but also economic sustainability, as it has to profit the government and help communities around them grow and help other stakeholders that might be involved in the market of the good. So a few techniques are forest restoration, enhancing soil content, enhanced weathering, ocean fertilization, carbon embedded biomass such as timber, and carbon capture. One company that works on capturing CO2 from the air is called Climeworks, which currently captures approximately 8 kilograms of carbon dioxide from the air every single day. Now onto the process of carbon sequestration, which is the process of capturing and storing carbon dioxide from our atmosphere for land use management. Biochar is this charcoal-like substance which is made by burning organic material such as biomass. However, biochar can... Next up is biomass, which is an animal's total mass that can be converted into energy. Okay, next up is enhanced weathering, which is when a specific type of rock, basalt, is split in half, which releases charged particles to bond with the CO2, and then it comes down and creates a product which can be stored. Carbon dioxide capture is a technology that can capture CO2 from power plants. Basically, when fossil fuels are heated up, carbon dioxide and multiple other gases and products are released from the tube. To capture the CO2, a chemical is sprayed into the tube that bonds with the carbon dioxide and allows the carbon dioxide to fall all the way back down to the tube. The product is heated up to a point where only pure carbon dioxide remains, and then that product is converted into a solid and then transported or stored for future use. Next up is ocean fertilization, which is the strategy where scientists go to the ocean and dump iron fillings and multiple other nutrients to encourage phytoplankton growth. And since oceans naturally absorb CO2, phytoplankton naturally use CO2 to grow. Once they die, the CO2 that they used to have in their life gets buried under the sedimentary rock at the bottom of the ocean. This is a good idea in theory, but it has multiple negative consequences, such as the disruption of the ocean food chain. So if you think a bunch of scientists dumping a bunch of stuff into the ocean has ever been a good idea, think again. Now on to ocean upwelling, which is when parallel winds to the shore push warm water away from the coastline, which allows cold water to seep in from the bottom of the ocean all the way to the top. This cold water is filled with a lot of nutrients, as all of the dead fish from the bottom, which are full of nutrients and organic waste, are all brought up to the top. As a result, the ocean becomes more productive, specifically for that of phytoplankton, which removes CO2 from the atmosphere, as I discussed before. It's really interesting that around a quarter of all the seafood that we eat come from only 5% of all the ocean area in the world, specifically that of ocean upwelling sites. A few more CO2 removal strategies include natural removal. This includes trees, plants which just suck in CO2 and convert it to oxygen, as well as this more efficient concrete, which requires CO2 to create and keeps the CO2 trapped in the system forever. Another strategy to reduce the temperature of the Earth is to reduce the amount of sunlight that hits the surface of the Earth, as less sunlight reaching the surface means lower temperatures. Here are 6 solar geoengineering technologies that could in theory reduce the temperature by reflecting sunlight away from the Earth. Okay, first is aerosol injection. This is when you shoot sulfur dioxide aerosols into the atmosphere, which when mixed with air creates something called sulfuric acid, which naturally reflects light. A problem with this technology and many other solar geoengineering technologies is that it does not actually solve climate change, as it's just a temporary relief. Because if we were to stop, let's say, putting aerosols into the atmosphere, all of a sudden the Earth would heat up to the state it was if the aerosols weren't in the air. If this happens, let's say in the year 2100, we'll only experience a temperature difference of, let's say, 5 degrees, but many species of animals, insects all across the world will die because of the sudden change in temperature. On the bright side, this technology could stall global warming to a point where we have removed all the other greenhouse gases that are clogging up our atmosphere. That way we prevent our Earth from reaching that deadly 2 degrees increase in temperature. This can also be seen on the graph right here, which describes the temperature increase and many preventative measures that can be taken to stop global warming, including the red line, which is business as usual, which is defined as if we were to take no action, and then is this yellow line, which is defined just as mitigations, which is if we were to reduce our carbon footprint, which is what everyone's saying we should do, but it's not enough. And then carbon reduction strategy, which, as you can see, slowly decreases the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And then solar radiation mitigation, which is when we start reflecting light back out into space. Okay, on number 2 is marine cloud brightening. This involves getting on a bunch of ships, flying above clouds, and then spraying salt water on them. These salt particles help condense water vapor into liquid, and with more water, clouds would appear larger and brighter, which reflects sunlight away from the Earth. So marine cloud brightening has a few negative effects on weather patterns, ocean biology, as well as the fact that it doesn't actually solve global warming. Instead, it provides a relief from the symptoms. Okay, high-albedo crops and buildings are when you paint every building or everything as white as possible. That way it reflects as much light as possible. This includes making cities white and adding a gene to crops, which makes them waxy, which reflects light. Ocean mirror. Okay, this one's probably the most ridiculous, but it could work in theory. Basically, you get a massive fleet of sea vessels to go around the Earth, creating small micro bubbles in the ocean surface which reflect light. Yay, now global warming is solved. This brings up the really big problem of who is going to be willing to drive boats around the world, creating basically bubbles. If we were, let's say, to create a chemical that would create bubbles that would reflect sunlight, it would still bring up the problem of affecting deep sea habitats who would be depleted of the sunlight, which is a big problem for ocean biology. Cloud thinning. Now this is the process of removing these clouds called cirrus clouds. Yeah, if you see these clouds in the sky, know that they are bad. Even though they do reflect a little bit of sunlight, they absorb a lot more long wave radiation, which heats up the Earth. A solution to removing these clouds would be to send up drones and shoot small aerosols that contain dust or pollen that would remove the clouds. Finally is the space mirror. Who thought of this idea? We basically make a massive mirror and then send it to orbit. This could work because reducing the amount of sunlight that reaches the Earth by only 2% could cool the Earth enough to pre-industrial revolution standards. However, sending a large mirror to space is challenging to say the least. Okay, now onto a few terms relating to solar geoengineering. First up is solar radiation, which is electromagnetic light radiated from the sun. Again, electromagnetic radiation is radiation across the entire spectrum. This includes various frequencies such as infrared, visible light, UV, gamma, and many more. Albedo is a term that describes the amount of light that is reflected from a surface without being absorbed. An example would be snow, which is a high albedo as it's white. As a reminder, a white object is white because it reflects all of the visible wavelength. Okay, the ice albedo feedback is a cycle where the Arctic and Antarctic ice melts, which means that there's less albedo surfaces, which means that more heat is absorbed, which means that more ice melts as a result, and the cycle keeps repeating and compounding. Radiative forcing is a measure of how much radiation or how much light is entering the Earth and how much is being reflected back into space. Next is marine cloud brightening, which I talked about before, and you can go back to this period in the video and you can watch it again if you want to. Desert reflectors is a theory where we can put reflective objects such as mirror or albedo surfaces on the desert to cool the desert and the earth. This can also act as an anti-desertification method, as the earth is cooled and more plant life can live in the desert. Cool roof is a technology where you create a reflective or white surface and put it on top of buildings to cool down the building and the earth. As a result, less heat is absorbed and houses actually stay cooler during the summertime, compared to the normal urban design, which is black pavement that absorbs all the heat. Sun shield. This is where we need a massive umbrella to shield the earth and cool it down. Basically, that's it. Yeah. Again, we cool the earth by preventing light from actually reaching the surface, similar to the space mirror. Next is stratospheric aerosols, where we shoot aerosols into the stratosphere, which contain normally sulfur dioxide. And as a result, these aerosols end up reflecting sunlight back to space. Mount Pinatubo is an active volcano in the Philippines that erupted in the 1990s. As a result, a global layer of sulfur dioxide was emitted into the stratosphere, similar to that of the stratospheric aerosols, which ended up cooling the earth by around 0.5 Celsius on a global scale. Okay, now on to Arctic methane release. Under the permafrost in the Arctic, there is a lot of methane, and the act of melting this permafrost because of global warming means that more methane is released into the environment. And as a reminder, methane is a greenhouse gas that traps more heat than CO2. Okay, now on to something called a moral hazard. This is defined as the lack of incentive to protect from risk when one is protected from its consequences. With global warming, this ponders the question whether geoengineering makes people lose the political will to take other preventative measures, such as cutting down on fossil fuels. And since there are around 50 years left of oil supply in the world, yes, oil is not an infinite substance, businesses will soon realize that their method of fossil fuels is not self-sustaining and will be forced to stop. So I definitely think that sucking CO2 out of the atmosphere and reflecting sunlight back into space will increase the amount of oil that's consumed. But in the long run, it's going to mean that we're going to run out of oil sooner, which means that businesses who rely on fossil fuels as their main way to create profits will soon go out of business. And by that stage, hopefully one of these CO2 geoengineering technologies have saved us. So will the Antarctic become habitable in the future? The answer is actually yes. The main problem with living on the Arctic would be the amount of time we would spend without sunlight compared to the cold temperatures. Simply because the angle of the sun, which it's at the highest, which is on the summer solstice, is approximately 47 degrees. This might sound like a high angle, but it's really not, because it's only this high on noon of the longest day, and the rest of the year it's at pretty small angles, which makes it really challenging to grow crops. However, there are cities such as one in Norway that is self-sustaining with growing crops with the sun at such low elevation, so scientists propose that it would be possible to settle on the Antarctic. Okay, now is the act of modifying the weather. First up is cloud seeding. This is the process of shooting condensed nucleus into clouds, which are normally just organic matter, which then combine with water and form rain or ice. In cloud seeding, these nucleus are normally potassium chloride and other chemicals that attract water together to guarantee precipitation. Simply put, without clouds, this process won't work. Glaciogenic seeding is the process of simulating ice growth in clouds, while hygroscopic seeding is used for warmer clouds. So how I remember both of these is that glaciogenic sounds a lot like a glacier, and glaciers, as you know, just made of ice. So glaciogenic, you can sort of correlate that word with snow and ice. Okay, fog harps are these devices that can capture moisture in extremely dry areas and turn it into water. Unlike previous designs of the net, the new design captures microscopic water and makes it slide down the net to be collected and possibly drink. Okay, bioprecipitation refers to precipitation by organisms. Yes, it seems like the condensed nucleus necessary for cloud seeding can be done with bacteria. Okay, now on to something called Cloudbuster, which is this technology created by, let me pronounce his name, Wilhelm Reich. Okay, it's this technology created by this person. I'm not even gonna pronounce his name. Okay, basically the idea behind this device was to manipulate something called orgone energy in the atmosphere to create rain. Sorry, this thing he called orgone energy was a pseudoscience and the entire technology did not end up working. Finally is the Hailcannon, which are these cannons that make loud sounds with the intention of stopping hail. Why did I say Yale? They make a lot of sound with the intention of stopping hail. In theory, this would create shockwaves that would disrupt the creation of hail. Sorry, these did not work. As you would expect lightning claps to destroy hail, as they make much louder sounds during a storm. Okay, now on to the final bullet point of this video, and that is Beijing's political blue sky. Okay, basically how this works is when there is a political event going on in the country, Beijing tells all of the factories to stop production with the attempt to clear all the pollution to create a blue sky. The result of this is an even harsher amount of pollution once the politics end. The cause of this is most likely the increase in factory production to make up for the economic loss the shutdown created. Another incident of weather manipulation is that of the US during the Vietnam War, where the US tried to make it rain more during the monsoon season to slow down the Vietnamese army. It is unknown whether this worked or not, but it did create an international treaty that prevented all countries from using the weather for war purposes. This treaty is called the UN's Environmental Modification Convention, which prevents the use of weather modification with the intention of inducing damage or destruction. Anyways, I hope you found this video helpful. As always, please share this video with your teammates who might not have studied the science curriculum yet or might need a little bit of review leading up to the competition. I hope you found this video helpful, and until next time, stay productive. I'll see you guys in the next video and have a great day. Goodbye.